We are in room 408. Mike Enslin was still standing in front of the Dolphin Hotel door, staring at the camera. He noticed the hotel manager sitting in a chair in the lobby. The moment their eyes met, Mike's heart sank. Shouldn't the lawyer have brought him along? But that was the only thought that crossed his mind as time passed. The hotel manager seemed determined to create a barrier between Mike and room 1408. As Mike stepped through the lobby door, Mr. Olin, the hotel manager, stood up, securing his seat and extending his hand towards Mike. The hotel was small but elegant. As Mike moved, a man dressed in a woman's outfit walked by, shifting a small bag in his left hand before extending his right hand to greet Mr. Olin. Soft music played from somewhere in the background. "Good evening, Mr. Enslin," Olin said. "How are you? Is there a problem?" Olin's face showed a hint of unease. His eyes darted around the hotel lobby for a moment, as if searching for someone to save him. The hotel door opened, revealing a man and his wife asking for theater tickets. The receptionist was busy rebooking a room for a new tenant. Everyone seemed to be going about their business, as if they had all found the help they needed, except for Olin, who had fallen into the writer's trap. He didn't know how to answer Mike's question. Mike repeated, "Mr. Olin, what is the matter?" "Mr. Enslin, can I speak to you in my office for a moment? Why not? All these details, when written, will put the reader in the mood and explain the black image in his imagination of room 1408. These are things that readers love." The receptionist assured Mike that the manager was really afraid of what could happen to him in room 1408. "Yes, of course, we'll talk in your office." Olin reached for Mike's bag. "Excuse me? Don't be shy. The bag only contains a change and a toothbrush." "Are you sure?" "Yes. I'm actually wearing my favorite Hawaiian shirt. It helps me with the evil spirits." But Olin didn't smile at Mike's reaction. He was shocked and silent. He was a man in charge of the body. He was wearing a dark-colored coat and a tie tied to his eye. "All right, come with me." He walked in the hotel's hallway. He was showing hesitation. He was showing defeat. In the office room, which was mostly made of wood, Mike's manager seemed to have regained some of his confidence. The hotel was built in 1910. Mike didn't expect that the reviews would be written in the newspapers and the big magazines about what he would publish about the hotel, but he preferred to do the research well before writing it. The floor was covered with a luxurious Persian carpet. 2 carpets were standing in the corners of the room. A light yellow light was shining on the place, and a 3rd small carpet was on the office. Mike also saw copies of the last 3 books on the office floor. It's obvious that the manager had done his research before the interview. Mike sat on a chair in front of the office. He expected that the manager would take his seat behind the office, but the manager pulled the chair in front of him. He put his foot on his foot and opened the door on the office floor and asked Mike's cigar, "Mr. Enslin?" "No, thank you." "I don't smoke." Olin's eyes caught the cigarette behind Mike's ear. It was as if Mike was a traditional journalist who always had a cigarette stuck behind his ear under a newspaper label. This cigarette was a part of Mike. He didn't understand why Olin looked at him so surprisingly, but when he noticed, he laughed. He took the cigarette out of his ear, looked at it, and then looked at Olin. "I haven't smoked a single cigarette for 9 years. My older brother died of lung cancer, and I stopped as soon as he died. This cigarette behind my ear is a part of a memory and a part of a kind of a fad. I think like my tree shirt, for example. Or like people hanging on the wall above the office, a cigarette in a glass box with the words, 'In the case of emergencies,' by the way. Is it allowed to smoke in a room of 1408? I mean, in the case of a nuclear war, for example. Can I smoke? In fact, yes, it is allowed to smoke. Great. Isn't that something I have to worry about?" The hotel manager laughed again. A loud laugh, even though they were in the office room. And this is supposed to be his private, safe place. Even when Mike visited him the day before and with a lawyer, Olin started to feel less nervous as soon as they entered the office room. Why not? How long would you feel under control if you didn't feel under control in your place? And the office is his place. The office is hung with old paintings on the walls, the proud carpet on the floor, and expensive cigarettes on the desk of the office. This room must have seen a lot of ups and downs before Olin. A lot of work agreements and deals since 1910 and until now. Are you sure there's nothing I can do to get this idea out of your mind? Unfortunately, no, Mike replied, and he puts the cigarette back in its place. This is the only similarity between him and those old journalists. The cigarette behind the ear. Olin, who changes his clothes every day. He never felt at the end of the day when he was smoking the cigarette any desire to smoke it, especially when he saw the effects of the sweat on it. How did he smoke 30 or 40 cigarettes a day 20 years before? This is a question he could never answer. Or the more correct question, why did he do that? Not how Olin put his hand on a pile of books and said, "I wish from the bottom of my heart that you change your mind." Mike opened his bag and took out a small recording device. "Are you ready to record this incident, Mr. Olin?" Olin shook his hand and Mike pressed the record button. A small red light came on and the cow ran away. At that time, Olin was reading a book in the bookshelf, reading the headlines. As usual, when Mike sees copies of his books in someone's hand, he is overwhelmed with emotions, pride, confusion, challenge, and shame. There was no real reason to make him ashamed of his books, especially since it guaranteed him financial stability during the last 5 years. But for a moment, he regretted that he was using the recording device while Olin was pronouncing the titles of his books. Later, when he heard the recording, he couldn't help but laugh at the director's voice. While he was reading and without realizing it, Mike put his hand behind his ear. 10 nights in a residential house, 10 nights in a residential cell, 10 nights in 10 residential castles. He raised his eyes, and Mike's eyes, and a smile on his lips. Of course, I visited Scotland for this book and maybe Vienna too, and all travel expenses can be deducted from taxes, of course. Right? The residential areas are your job in the first place. I want to say something. Are you sensitive about your books? Of course I am, but not to the point of weakness. Imagine that you can make me change my mind just by criticizing my books like that. No, not at all. I didn't mean to. It's just curiosity. I sent someone to buy all the books 2 days ago as soon as I received your offer. That was a request, not an offer. And it's still my request, and it won't change. And as the lawyer said, and as the law states, you don't have the right to stop me from staying in a particular room in the hotel if I ordered this room. The room is not occupied. Room 1408 is not occupied. In fact, room 1408 is never occupied. But his words couldn't distract Mr. Olin from the last 3 books for Mike, which were classified as the best-selling book for the New York Times. He simply flipped through the books for the 3rd time. The light beige light shown on the cover, the purple used a lot in the cover design. Psychoanalysis is very suitable for horror books. That's what the publisher said to Mike. Unfortunately, I can't look at the books for more than a few hours. I was very busy. I'm always busy. The hotel is small compared to New York, but we have more than 90% of the time. And probably, a new problem will arise with every new book, like a problem with me. Mr. Olin smiled. No, I can say that you are a little bit different, especially after your visit with the lawyer and all your threats. This sentence bothered Mike. He didn't threaten him in any way, unless the manager considered the presence of the lawyer a threat. Mike had to bring a lawyer. But just like anyone, he used a key to open the door. Mike was forced to bring a lawyer with him. But like anyone, he had to use keys to unlock an old rusty box. He no longer had the key. With this idea, he had another one. In this case, he didn't own the alleged box. But the state law says the opposite clearly. If you want to take room 1408, that's your right, as long as no one else asks for it first. He noticed that Olin was watching him. He still had that sad smile on his face, as if he was listening to Mike's inner dialogue, word for word. It was an uncomfortable feeling. Mike began to feel that the whole interview was uncomfortable. He felt that as soon as he turned on the recording device, which usually shakes the other side, he was in a defensive position. Mr. Olin, I feel that you want to say something. And honestly, I can't say it. Forgive me, it's been a long day. If we talk about room 1408, please allow me to take the room now. And I read some of the, what do you call them? Articles? Notes? Mike used to call them the sources of quick income. But he wouldn't say that, and the recording device was on. Although this recording device is his. Ah, stories. Yes. I read a story from every book. I read the story of the House of Trelsby, the Resident, from the book The Resident's House. Yes, the one about the clown. The clown that the Trelsby family killed, made up of 6 people, and we still don't know who he is. Yes, exactly. I also read the story about the night you spent in the cemetery in Alaska, about the grave of the 2 murderers, and I also read your testimony about the night you spent in Gatsby Castle. This was very interesting. I was amazed, to be honest. Mike was well trained to pick up any joke about his books, and sometimes he was embarrassed to hear a joke, although it wasn't always true.